Okay, let's get started here. So, as you can see on screen, and you probably read the title of the video here, I'm gonna. Oh, how do I explain it? I learned this kind of pixel art. I don't know how accurate it is. Okay, I'm just gonna call it pixel art. Maybe it's not real pixel art. I don't really know, but I learned this new technique. What was the guy's name? It was like Mort or something. You know what? I'll just link the tutorial real quick. Just give me 1 second here. I mean, like, what I'm trying to say is I'm just gonna try and explain what I just learned on stream, because honestly, I mean, his video here that I'm just gonna show you, it's coming, just a second here. What I'm saying is his video goes into a little bit more detail, I guess, to make actual pixel art where you're like moving each individual pixel, right? My technique, as you can see here, is more of like uh, I take a color and I just kind of brush it over, and then I make it lighter or darker to give it that little bit of detail. But I don't know, it gives it a nice pixelated look. I don't know exactly, like, I don't know if this counts as pixel art. I'm not really gonna argue or try to waste too much time on definitions here, but yeah, his method was pretty intense. It's not too hard to follow along, to be honest. Like, it's fairly simple, but I think, for example, like, his method is more like using these grids as like individual. Look, I don't know how to explain it. I'm just gonna try and explain what I learned, okay? So, yeah, as you can see here, I've been making these little, I don't know, like, blocks of grass, the sign from his tutorial. I did a box here, and then a barrel, just because a lot of the stuff I was working on before was really blocky, so it's kind of easy here to line up the pixels, right? But on a shape like this, you can see like that, like right on the edges, it's not exactly a like a perfect pixel, but still, I just wanted to try and challenge myself a little bit here. So continuing with that, I'm going to just try and create more and more of these assets to add to the scene. So if you're wondering why the right screen and the left screen look so different here, as it's a bit of these shading things that I applied to it. So don't get scared. Okay, no, it's not even the shader editor. Right here. Just move that window. So that's the output. That's what's displaying the texture. And this emission, you see, if I turn it up or down, I turn up or down that brightness. That, from what I understand from his tutorial, is so it is basically so that like no light source can affect these textures. You just get to see them as is, regardless of what lighting is in the scene. I don't know. I'm just following a tutorial. But what I learned here was this cool little trick here. So if I take object info, again, like, you don't have to worry if like this is a little bit too advanced, but basically the way this is set up is whenever I duplicate this object, like here, it'll always come out a random hue shifted color. Now, it's a little bit basic right now because I haven't set it up to, like, I didn't really set it up to, I can fine tune it is what I'm saying. Right now, it's basically just doing this. So let me just undo all that. If we look at that basic sign right here, this one. So what this hue slider is doing is it's changing its color, right? So what I'm saying is whenever, like, whatever this object info is, like, again, I don't know what these nodes really do, but I just take a random output from it and put it into that hue. So basically what I'm trying to tell it is that every time you're duplicated, move that hue slider a little bit. Now, how do I, like, a lot of them are coming out the same. You can see, like, a lot of them are these pink ones, so I don't quite know how to fine-tune it where I could, I could have, like, in-between colors. Like, I guess it has to do with some kind of math stuff that, you know what, I might be able to figure it out, actually. I could probably try it right now. And what is that, math? No, I can do math. It's not exactly the... Let's see here. So I'm taking this random value, okay, and I'm saying multiply it by X value, which I guess could be, and yeah, that might actually work. So let's try 0.5. So if I understand this correctly, I'm saying every time I duplicate, I want you to apply a random value to that hue, but I don't want it to just be a random value. Whatever that value is should be multiplied by 0.5. So I think that gives me a little bit more, like instead of 0.7 to 0.8 to 0.9, it would be like 0.7 to 0.75 or something like that. Again, I don't really know. I'm just going to test this out and see. It's alright. Anyway, not too important right now. So I don't know. I just wanted to experiment with that a little bit. That's like, this is completely irrelevant to the texturing stuff. The only stuff that that really matters is this. Yeah, you know what? I'll just do this. Just take that. Yeah, so the only stuff that really matters right now is just these 3 nodes. So I have my image texture. I'll get into this in a little bit, but just so you understand like the basic workflow of it is, this pixel sign is this object's texture. So what is the texture? Yeah, this is really cramped. It's really hard to explain. It's this thing basically. So you get this sign, and yeah, so it'd probably be easier if I just selected it so you could see. So let's take this back part of the sign, for example. If I click that, you see it corresponds to this part of the texture. So this whole image is represented by this pixel sign node. So that comes into the emission shader, or whatever it's called. I think it's a shader. And it helps me, like I said at the beginning, it basically just ignores light sources, so it shines like as is. I don't know. And that goes to the material output. If nothing goes to the material output, then it just doesn't appear at all. So, but yeah, that's the basics of how this all works. I just added in this extra stuff where I said every time it's copied, you take a random value. You just get rid of that multiply. So I basically said it like this. Every time this object is duplicated, I want you to randomize this. And why am I getting into all this? This doesn't matter. This is irrelevant. I'm just gonna... Sorry about that. I'm just gonna continue. I'm just gonna keep making stuff, and I'll just try and explain it as I go, because it's... Whatever the hell I just explained is like completely unrelated to this. It's just to get these color modifications, and... I mean, honestly, they don't even look that good, so... I don't know. I'll figure more of that stuff out later. But right now I'm just gonna... So as you can see, I only have 1, 2, 3, 4 assets that I've made so far. The grass, the barrel, the box, and the sign. And I guess I could name them. Actually, that'd probably be a lot easier. So let me just name these real quick. I'll call that sign. We'll call that box. We'll call that barrel. And then... I don't want to call this grass because I do want to try and model little grass blades, so I'll call this... Oh, we just call it grass base. Yeah, there we go. So now it should be a little bit easier to follow. Oh, okay, and then there's all these that... Ah, crap. Okay. I'm just gonna ignore these for now. I'm not gonna bother renaming them, but you can physically see what they are, so I don't really need to name them. But there's just one important thing I want to... and I want to highlight. That's a lot of copies. I'm just... Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this, 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 and this. And I'm going to move them to their own group. Right now, this is kind of boring. Not really related to the pixel art stuff, but I'm just trying to keep everything organized here. So it's just a little bit easier to follow along. So we'll call this group base assets. Pretty bad name, but now we can see... So if I go to here and just close that, whenever I select barrel, that barrel is highlighted. If I select box, the box is highlighted. So, yeah, kind of irrelevant, but but yeah, okay, let's just get into this. So, how do I go about making these pixel textures? So, again, if you follow that Mort guy's tutorial, he'll teach you how to actually do like like real pixel art, you know, where you like control each individual square, like on these, right? Like he'll teach you how to do like each individual square, but my technique's a little bit different. But yeah, I don't know. Let's just get into it. So, as you can, let me just think for a second. What do I want to make? I made a box. I made a barrel, a sign. Let's think. I didn't really think about this too much. Let's make. Well, let's just start with something for now, I guess. Let's start with a cube. So normally this would have been a lot bigger, but I messed around with my grid settings, so it's like because of this tutorial. So it's not too important. What I'm gonna show you right now is it's not too important. Don't worry about the numbers and stuff. Let's just start with a basic cube and let's make a. Man, I really should have thought this through. I don't know what to make. Like, I want to make a sword, I guess. I can make a little low poly sword and try and texture that. So let's do that. It's a little bit advanced from the boxes and the barrels and the signs, but you know what I'm thinking now. You know what I'm gonna do? Just give me 1 second here. I'm gonna switch this view back to here. See, this color stuff isn't really necessary. I was just doing it just so I could see what that shader trick I did. I don't know, I'm at a loss of words here. It's like, I don't think this view is really necessary. It's just for me to play around, I guess. But what I want to do is this. Okay, let's split the view here. This view. So I'll have it this way and this way. So we can see with the little shader thing, and you know what? Actually, I got a better idea. Let's just ignore that. Let's just start. Okay, like it's gone on for way too long. Let's just get into this. I'm sorry. Usually, like it's just easier for me to focus if I'm not trying to explain what I do. Usually, I just listen to some stuff and then kind of work away at it. But I want to try and explain what I'm doing because I feel like it's. I don't know, probably be easier to understand what's going on here. So, first things first, I'm just gonna bring this box above the plane here, just so it sits flat on this. And how I do that, so you can see in the top left here, I'm in object mode, but I'm gonna go into edit mode, hit A to select everything here, and I tap 1 to get a front view. What I'm gonna do, so I want to line up that little orange dot with the bottom of this box. So how do I do that? I tap G, hold left click so I can lock it to the Z axis, and then I hold control so it snaps. And if I did it right, now it should be, it should basically just line up there. So what I can do now is come out of this. Again, I'm in object mode now, so I'll hit G, hold middle click, and just scroll it up ever so slightly. Now it's perfectly on the plane. So you know what, I'll just texture up this box because I'll just show you the technique, then I'll get into making something here. So first things first, let's give it a material. And as you can see here, it's got all these cool it's yeah, so how do I explain? There's so many advanced things here that are like that are gonna be way beyond, like if you're a completely new person watching this, probably have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm gonna apply this to a material. Okay, let me just put it this way. Let me open up my shader editor here. So this is the same menu as this one off to the side, so I can just reduce that off, and we can focus on this cube here. So we don't need any of this right now. Let's name this something. Let's name this material as cube. A great name. So I don't need this at all. All I need is a image texture, which is where that UV, like where we're gonna paint on. Like that's what we're gonna paint on. And we need an emission shader right here. Plug that in. We'll plug this in into color. So there's still nothing. That's because we haven't created our texture yet. So I'm gonna go with 64 by 64 because I think that gives me a little bit more resolution to play with. Whereas you can see these pixels are nice and chunky here because I think that was only 32 by 32. So I'll go with 64 by 64. So let's create a new image. Let's call it cube. I don't know, yeah, cube pixel. So instead of this, you can just click and then drag down to both of them. So let's make it 64. So that should be 64 pixels by 64 pixels. We don't need alpha because I'm not going to play around with transparency. And let's select a base color as, I don't know, blue. We'll make it blue. So I tab, okay, so that's like a basic material setup now. So our cube has a blue color to it, but we want to paint over it and give it these cool textures, like these pixel art textures. So the way to do that is we're going to go into UV editor, and there's no image loaded into it, so we're going to open up cube pixel. So that's the texture we'll be painting on. I guess I can just remove this this window. We don't need this one at the bottom here. So how do we start painting? We go into, so right now I'm in object mode, and there's a bunch of different modes that I can go into from this same window. So I'm just going to hold Control, hold Tab, and I'm going to move to texture paint, and then let go of Tab. So, you know, like just, yeah, so you hold Control, hold Tab, then you can, like, you can move your mouse around and determine which mode you want to go into. I want texture paint, so let's just go into texture paint mode. So now you can see, if I hit T, I get this paintbrush icon, so I'm going to bring this menu back out a bit. Right now I'm in the Materials tab, or Material Properties. I'm going to go all the way to the top to this wrench and screwdriver. Almost forgot what it was called. And, okay, so yeah, I didn't explain this palette thing, so I'll just explain it really quick here. And I'm just going to split the view because I don't want to keep recreating it. I'm going to open up the image editor, and I'm just going to open a pixel palette. So I have these palettes that I play around with. So I'll open up the Apollo one, the other one. As you can see, it's called Vines right now. So there's, what was the website name? Crap, I gotta figure that out because that's a good website. Just give me 1 second here. I know this tutorial stream's kind of all over the place, but low spec, that's what it was called. But I want to try and basically just walk you through how I went about this I just want to explain what I'm doing. Like, I want to try and show you all the steps without it being so confusing here. I'm just gonna drop this in the chat. So if you go to that website and you go to that that palette list section, which I think I already linked it in that link, then you can download these images. So just to reiterate, I went to image editor and I opened up this Apollo image, this PNG file, into Blender. So what I'll do now is I will go image, extract palette, and that's all I needed to do. So I'm just trying to make this a little bit easier to understand here. So I'm in texture paint. So this top little tab thing is it's called an active tool in workspace. Well, I'm just reading it as is, but what it means is if I'm in a different mode, I get different properties here. You see what I mean? So if I'm in texture paint mode, I just close some of those. If I'm in texture paint mode, I get access to my brushes and my brush colors. So let's just make it simple here. Let's go into brush settings and let's look at color palette. If I click this little left arrow, and so it gives me a list of all the palettes that I copied with that image editor off to the left. So what I'm saying here is if I just select this palette that we extracted, I get a completely different set of colors. Instead of creating my own, I mean, you can create your own and try and come up with them. I find it's a little bit easier to work with just already established color palettes. And that website's great. It gives you lots of great examples of like some of the art styles that use those color palettes. So anyway, with that being said, I'm going to go back to the original Vines flexible one because it's just the one I'm comfortable with. So as if this intro couldn't get any, oh my god, I'm screwing it up. Screwing all this up. As if this couldn't get any worse. I mean, like, I already rambled about... Okay, let's just get into this. So first things first, I have a few sliders and tools up here. So let's just try and draw on it. It's not... You can't really see. I have to keep clicking to really get that paint in. So it's because my strength over here is so low. If I just raise that strength up, I can start painting on it. But you'll notice it kind of looks bad. It doesn't look as sharp as these ones, and it's really blurry, right? So the first thing we can do is go back into the material. I'll explain it in the shader editor just because it's a little bit easier to read there. I'll just bring down a little menu here. Come into the shader editor. So the reason this texture is so blurry is because of this linear setting. If I go to closest, it becomes much more precise, I guess you could say. So I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that when I set up the material. We set up that flat blue material as a 64 by 64 texture, and then I forgot to select closest on it. So now I get these fine details. But again, it's kind of annoying to constantly come up here and change the slider setting, and oh, you can just get rid of this now. Just want to try and keep this as simple as I can. So if I go back into this brush settings, let's say I want to add some red to it, but it's still, I mean, it's decent, but it's not really ideal. So I'll teach you a little shortcut here. If I tap F, I can change the size of my brush, okay? And if I hold Shift F, if I move up, like if I move away from the circle or into it, I can change the opacity of the color I selected. So at 1, it'll just be a flat red color, right? But if I go to a lower opacity, then it kind of, I have to paint in layers. Like if I keep clicking over and over and over again, you see I can start putting on more of that red color. So if I were to just tap one area repeatedly, it gets darker and dark, you know, it gets lighter and lighter. So opacity is a really fun way to add some detail to these textures. So you just click a few times over here, and if it's too strong, you just reduce it more, and you can change to a different color. So with that being said, with that with that out of the way, now we understand these little shortcuts, or maybe not, because it's all new to you. What was I gonna do now? I don't know, I'll figure something out. I'll try and explain what I'm doing a little bit better here. So, I'm gonna have to teach you how to do this UV unwrapping thing before we get into the actually painting these textures. So, again, following that Mort guy's tutorial, and I don't fully understand this, and I'm not gonna pretend I do, but I'll just walk you through the steps. So I'll go back into edit mode. Oops. Yeah, I'll go back into edit mode here. And as you can see, if I select each face, so if I click all of them, like, this box is laid out on a flat, like this 3D object is laid out flat in a 2D image, so each face corresponds to a different part of the texture, okay? So what I want to do to ensure that these are all accurate, okay, this is, okay, instead of this flat blue image, I'm going to change this texture pattern. And this texture pattern, if you go to that Mort guy's video, he has a link to, I'm just going to turn off this fan. He has a link to, what does he call it? A pixel grid. So, I guess this had more to do with his, actually, you know what? I don't need to show it to you because, my method doesn't even use that pixel grid. I don't need to be so accurate. So I'm just going to try and explain this as quick as I can. We'll select the whole object in edit mode. We'll tap U. Go to cube projection. We'll click this little drop down menu and yeah, I don't know, it should be fine. Now we'll go to this window, the UV editing map, or the UV editing window, UV editor. We'll select all the faces. So right now what happened is each of these faces are all pretty much just overlapping each other. We don't want that. If you wanted to make a, I guess that's a bad example. I guess this sign would have been a better example, but let me just pause for a moment here and let me try and explain how these textures work. So if I click this sign and I look at its UV maps, it's not corresponding to this. That's because in the material, it's using the image called pixel sign. So I'm still in that UV editor, and I'm on a different image, that cube pixel one. So if I change the image to pixel sign, this is that little chart, that graph, that, what do you call it, that pixel grid that he gives out. It basically just lets you, so if I just unselect these, it lets you line up your pixels like perfectly or something like that. Anyway, what I'm trying to explain is each of these corresponds to a different part of the texture here, right? So what that cube mapping projection did over here, if I go back to cube pixel, it overlaid each of these faces on top of each other, and that doesn't give us much flexibility. We want flexibility on those different faces like this one, so we get I don't know, I'm just going in circles at this point. We'll just come here, select A, we'll go to UV, come down to pack islands, and again, this was in his tutorial, so this margin you could put at 0.05, and what that does is it gives you a little bit of a gap between the two faces. So because like I just explained, we don't want faces to be overlapping too much, because then we can't do interesting details like this white paper on the sign versus the back of it, which doesn't have any paper. So for this cube, what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to turn off rotate, like I guess, I don't know why, but I'm just going to do it because that's how I learned it. So after that has all been selected, I will do one last thing. I will hold Shift S, and I will move. First of all select everything, select all the coordinates. Shift S, selected to pixels. And then I guess the final thing you do is snap to pixels and you select corners. So this lets you just finally move them over top of like you're moving it on a grid as opposed to just freely moving it about. It's more like it's more precise. So because I want to paint yeah, let's say for example I want to paint all of these to be different faces. So instead of cube project, I will go to smart UV project, and I'll just change this island margin to 0.05. Let's bump it up a little bit. Click OK. So now you can see each face is represented differently, and that's perfect for this cube. Let's finally get into this this texture painting stuff. Hold Control Tab, go into Texture Paint, and make sure we have our little color palette here. So let's first of all, so let me hit T so I bring up my tools. Let's make another box, okay, because I don't know, a box is easy to make. Let's just make it a nice orange box. So already you can see there's some problems here. So I think it's because I didn't do this. Select all the faces, selected to pixels. Now it should all line up nice and even in those yeah, basically you just have to do that selected to pixels thing. It just lines all the coordinates back up. So what I just did was I just filled in the whole color on the box. So now I can go back to my brush settings, the one with the opacity, and I can start painting each individual face different textures. But I want it to be a little bit more uniform and a little bit more even than that. So either I could... Actually, the lazy way to do this, I don't know if it's lazy per se, but you could take... it's confusing because they're all orange. Orange over orange. You could take each face and just line them up over each other. And that works. It's a little bit tedious, but... I'm selecting L, like I tap L to select the whole face, and then I could just bring it over here. Or I could go into, if I hit 3, okay, so, yeah, this is all over the place. This is hard to understand. I'm just pressing random buttons now. Let me do one thing here. Let me just make these little vertices a little bit bigger, so they're a little bit easier to understand here. I go to my 3D viewport setting, vertex size, so I'll just increase those a little bit, just so it's a little bit easier to understand what I'm doing here. Yeah, I don't know how to make those edges thicker, but yeah, I guess that's a little bit too big. I can turn it down a little bit. Yeah, it should be fine. So what are these? What are these little dots? So those are called vertexes. So just get rid of this menu. I'm in edit mode, which lets me move around these vertexes, or these vertices, I guess you'd call them. Vertex for one, vertices for multiples. So if I click 2, now I can select each individual edge here and move those around. And if I hit 3, I can select each individual face. So the way this works is one vertex moves that, 2 vertexes is actually an edge, right, that line in between, and 4 vertexes is a face. So I can move this whole face up and down. So what I was trying to explain before all that was I can't even remember what I was trying to explain here. Oh, the faces. Okay, yeah, so that 1, 2, 3 method, that vertex, edge, and face selection, also applies to this 2D coordinate system. So I could grab individual vertexes for the texture, or I could grab edges up and down, or I could select the whole face. So what I was trying to explain here was, okay, let me do one thing because that's kind of hard to see right now. Just gonna go back into texture paint. I'm gonna take a different color. We'll make it green. All of this should be green. Yeah, don't worry about the orange part. So what I'm saying is, what am I working on? What's up, Tyler? I basically learned how to do this pixel art kind of style in Blender, like in 3D. So I'm attempting to explain my thought process, but really struggling, man. But yeah, what I'm trying to explain here is like, if I wanted to get, so if I take this box here, go into object mode. If I take this box and I look at its textures, if I go into edit mode and look, there's only 2 of them. So if I open up its image here, oh, let me just open up. It was called Pixel Box. There we go. So, yeah, I mean, I'll just try and explain it with this box, because it'll probably be a lot easier just to explain. So I have my box, right? That face corresponds to that part of the texture. So if I move that over, just turn off this little overlay. So if I move this face over, it changes what's on the face of that texture. And only for that face. So if I select a different face, I move it down to here, now it's a different part of the texture. So what I was saying is, because, yeah, either I could have all these textures on one part of the map here, right? So if I change one of them, then all of them should change. So if I go back to this overlay, go into texture paint, increase my brush size a little bit. Oh, I'm in fill mode. So let's say I want to make these corners, oh, let me just select it all, then go into weight paint, or into texture paint. Let's say I want to make these corners completely black. So how do I do that? That's not even black, it's like dark brown. I'll come down here and I'll just reduce the texture size. So because all these faces they share the same coordinates. If I change one face, I change them all. So maybe you want that in your texture, maybe you want to add a little bit more detail. So for example, let's make a block of wood. So let's take this I'm like struggling to remember my own controls. Let's take this green object and let's make it into a nice block of wood. So going back to cube pixel. Yeah, okay. Let's fill it in first. Let's just fill it in as like a dark brown color. There. So I'm thinking of a log of wood from Minecraft as if it was cut from like the top here. So these sides here, let's go back into edit mode. 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 should share the same space. So let's take these and we'll move them, we'll just move them to this corner. Down into this corner. So now they all share the same face. And let's just move these top and bottom ones somewhere else. We'll overlap them first, so I only have to change one of them. Just zoom in a bit. We'll just, yeah, we'll leave it as is right now. Actually, you know what? We'll make them orange just to differentiate it a little bit. And that bottom one didn't change because I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. Okay, let's just, like I said, it's hard to explain as I work on it, but I'm just going to start painting all of these. So I'm only going to have to paint one side of these. So let's go into texture paint. Let's get our brush. And as you can see, if I start brushing on one side, it's not exactly uniform, and that's because I need to turn on these little mirrors, X and Y. So if I paint one corner, it paints it all. But that's kind of harsh. That texture's kind of harsh, so I'll just show you my technique. The first thing I do is I established its base color as brown, and I'm just gonna, where is it? Color picker. That way I can just quickly see at a glance what color I have right now. So let's reduce the opacity, and we'll make it a little bit darker. So what I'll do is I can just do these rough passes on the block of wood. But that's a little bit too big and chunky, so again, I'll just, I'll undo some of these. Reduce my, I'll just start on one flat side here, so it's a little bit easier to work with. And yeah, I mean, basically, I just kind of, like, so if I do one side, it does all 4 sides, so. I mean, it's a little bit of a, it's kind of complicated to explain, but honestly, the process is extremely simple. So, like, I just did one side, and already, all I did was keep this one color and change the opacity of it. So it's either darker or it's a little bit lighter. And check this out. Say I want to sample that exact color. So rather than trying to figure out what color that could be, I could just hold S, hover over it. Yeah, wait, how did this... I'm messing up my own tutorial. I can't even remember how I did that. Give me 1 second here. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so, okay, yeah, I was just tripping over nothing. So, yeah. Let's say I want to make this middle part like a little bit more like this color. So I'll just hold S and hover over it. And you can see right here, that's my active color. You can see it changing. It just samples whatever the little eyedropper's hovering over. So I want to sample that color. I'll go back to that one face. But I don't want it to be, I don't want it to be that thick, right? Or that heavy of an opacity. Are you doing this in Blender? Yeah, this is all in Blender, man. I just, if you follow that tutorial I linked in the chat, then it's actually really easy to do. So let's just say I want to add like a little bit of color variation in this. Again, that's a little bit too strong, so I'll just reduce the opacity a little bit. Could even reduce the brush size, so I'm not covering so many pixels, and just, add some faint details of random stuff. So that looks good enough to me. Let's start doing the top face here. So, okay, one thing I have to explain here is, let's say, right now, okay, if I select everything in edit mode, basically what this edit mode is saying is, which face do you want to paint right now? You can do this one or that one, or, you know, I want to select all of them right now, and I want to texture paint. But let's just bring that up to the max, and let's just pick a different color here to explain it better. This is my problem. Say I'm painting this and this, but it starts to bleed into this top, and I don't want it to do that. So how would I avoid that? So if I go back into edit mode, let's say, and again, this is a little bit of a shortcut. So if I go to face select, and I hold down Alt, and I click this line in between the edge, I can just select that whole loop. So let's say I only want to paint these ones, and not the top and bottom. I'll go back into texture paint mode, but then I'll click this mask icon. So even if I paint all over this, like, you know, the way I'm painting right now, it won't spill over to the top and bottom. And there's also a setting here I forgot to mention. This bleed value should be at 0. If it's a little bit higher, then I think it, yeah, see, it's like as I go around it, it still bleeds into the ones that I don't want it to go into. Oh, and one more thing, the fall off I forgot to mention should be at this this end value. It just makes it so, like, I'll just explain it. It's basically this opacity thing, the way it's working. And I'm saying if it's at 1, I don't see how it kind of fades in and out like that as I draw over it. I don't want that to happen with this pixel art stuff. I just want it to be flat, like a flat color. Okay, so let's, so now that we understand the masking thing, check this out. I can either hold Control and I and flip the selection, so now I can only work on the top here, or I can hold Shift and click. So I want to unlock these two. I want to work on these two, but then I want to lock them and work on this top one. So I'll just shift click on them. So yeah, it's kind of unnecessary, but let's just make sure. So if I work on the top, the bottom isn't selected because if I look at these two textures, they're not sharing the same space. So I'd have to do work on the top and bottom. To alleviate that, I'll just line up their coordinates on this image. So now they share the exact same space with each other. So I'll go back into texture paint mode, make sure my mask is on, and let's just color it, you know, a bit of a lighter color, just a fill color. Okay, one thing I like to do here, just so it's a little, because these overlays and, you know, this white line, this white fade out thing can be a little bit distracting. So what I'll do is just split the view here. We'll go into 3D viewport, and we'll just keep it at that angle. I'll just get rid of these headers, so it's a nice clean image. So what I'm showing you right now is I'll go back, yeah, texture paint. Oh, I gotta go to my brush. As I paint over this object, I can see it in real time how it should appear. So I can, let's say that's a little bit too light, that color. So let's go and fill it something else again. Maybe something a little bit darker. Actually, no, that was good enough. Let's just work with that. So let's go to a top view, so I only look at this face. So I like to paint head on. Like, yeah, you can paint like that, but it's kind of distracting, and I don't really like doing that. So let's sample these. No, I got a better idea. Okay, hold S. We have our color, and our fall off is at 1. I'm just gonna keep it at 1 just to demonstrate. If I paint over this, nothing happens because it's the same color that's already on it. But if I come here, and if I move the brightness up or down, I could start getting, you know, different shade. I guess you'd call it shades, like, or different, like, tones. It's the same color, it's just a little bit darker and a little bit brighter. So now that we understand that, I can do something really clever here. I can reduce my fall off, let's just say a little bit. And I guess we'll just zoom in a little bit more so I have a little bit more control here. And I can just play with that brightness setting. And you can see here it's already starting to give me a little bit more detail. So if I go really bright, then I don't know, it comes out really bright. If I want like a little bit darker in the middle, I could do something like that. So like already you could, that does not look like a block of wood. That looks so bad, but that's okay, because it's I'll just add a little bit of darker texture here, and like already it's like it looks, in my opinion at least, it looks doesn't look too bad. I'm just trying to figure out how do I change that viewport. Yeah, there we go. So, I don't know, I think that side needs a little bit more work. So, again, I'm still in texture paint mode. I can just Control I and switch out to the other faces. So now I can't draw on these top ones, but I can draw on the side ones. So, yeah, that's pretty much the technique I just wanted to show you here in a very, very long and convoluted way. But, yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know, I guess that's some damaged piece of wood. I don't know. Let's try and make another box actually, because that's kind of cool. So I need a dark color here, and I'll just paint down off to the sides here. I want it to be a little bit black, so. Oh, and I want to include the top and bottom pieces, so I'll just select everything in edit mode, then go to texture paint mode. So now I can paint on the tops and the bottom. So let's just restart this. Okay, let's just start with another color. Let's make a lighter shade of box. I don't know why a box, but it doesn't matter. Let's just start painting stuff in here and see what we come up with. And again, because of these X and Y mirrors, if I paint on one corner, it'll paint symmetrically on the other one. Maybe I don't want that, so let's try and figure this out here. So I'll go back to my front view. If I just have X on, where is it replicating it? It's kind of hard to explain, but I guess it's only on one side. Like, it's like, if I do X and Y, it does like all four corners at once. So it's, yeah, I don't know how to explain it. I don't really want to explain it. I'll just kind of go ahead and color this in. Actually, the first thing I do, I don't know why this is so hard to explain. I mean, I've done this so easily before. So I'll select this color. I'll reduce the opacity of it. Oh, and I turned on some other setting. I don't like that stabilized stroke setting. So yeah, I'll just make this a little bit darker. And again, I reduce the opacity. And I'll just bring in some random strokes here, just to give it a little bit more, I don't know, I guess give it a little bit more interesting of a look to it. I'll do the top too. And because I want this to be like a box or like a crate, what I'll do is try and get these top parts here. So I'll go with like a darker brown, keeping the same opacity because I kind of like this one. It's not too dark, and I can constantly click and click and click to refine it, so it kind of works for me. And then I could just do off to these sides here as well, and then probably the bottom. And yeah, just like that. I mean, I made I don't know what you would call that, but I made it. And yeah, so I don't know, I guess like I'm still kind of new to all this, like the pixel art stuff, like this live streaming stuff, but I just kind of wanted to explain what I'm doing because it can be a little bit confusing if I'm just silently streaming and expecting you to understand without actually explaining it. So I might sound a little bit random, or, you know, a little bit off tangent and all that, but it's just, I don't know, it's fun to get into this stuff. I mean, it's a little bit daunting, but I mean, once you're into it, it's so, I don't know, it's addicting. Like, let me just put it that way. It gets pretty addicting. So let's say, yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't really care at this point. I'm just gonna, I don't know, I just move it somewhere in the scene and just keep making stuff. Let's try making. See, like, I want to try the advanced stuff, like maybe like a tree and stuff like that. But I know it's gonna be a little bit tricky to texture because it wouldn't be an exact a cube shape, right? It'd be a little bit. It'd be awkward to do kind of like this barrel that I did and these. Not in object mode. I keep going back and forth between turning these overlays on and off. Without them, I can't see the outline, so I don't know what I'm selecting. So this was a kind of an ugly example. Like, a lot of the texture space just, I don't know, it's really bad. So I don't know if I want to save this because it's, I don't know, it's kind of ugly, but I guess I will. So what I'll do is image save as. I'll come down. I just have all my images saved here, so we'll call that, what is it, pixel box. So we'll call that pixel box 2. And important to note, so yeah, this now becomes, I guess I have to rename this too. I don't know how all this works, to be honest. Like, I really don't know, but all I know is if you don't save your image texture after playing around with it, if you don't save it and you open up Blender again, it's gone. Like, it does not get saved. So yeah, I'm not too proud of this one. It looks kind of bad in my opinion, but I'm just gonna keep it because I don't know, I put in a little bit of effort into it. So I'll just move it off to the side somewhere, so off in the corner like that. So let's try and make and if I go back to that that shader, I could apply that same effect I did here where as I copy it they all become different colors, but I'll just leave it as is right now. So let's see, what can I make now? I said I wanted to do a sword, so I guess the sword might be a little bit hard to do. Let's do a mushroom because, well, there's two reasons. One, I recently did that mushroom thing. I don't know if you saw it, but let me see if I can bring it up here. These. So this is the base model, right? Like very, very, I guess you would call it low poly. Like, it's not a lot of geometry to it. And this is the textured look of it. Now it looks kind of unsightly. It looks a little bit disgusting and kind of weird, but honestly speaking, like, it is so much fun to take, let me just rotate that, to take this and turn it into this. So yeah, the reason I want to do a mushroom is because it's not going to be like this. So what I was trying to do before I looked up this pixel art tutorial was I was trying to give it a blurry PlayStation 1 kind of texture to it, and it's sorry about that, and it kind of works out. Like, it kind of looks decent, but I want to try it in a much lower resolution with that pixel art stuff. But here's a cool technique I learned with all that texture painting stuff. So if I remember this right, if I come into texture paint and I'll probably try it. Man, this is gonna take it's gonna be hard to explain. But let's see if I can do it. So if I go back into texture paint, yeah, okay, here we go. So the way this works is I have so I have the color, which is mushroom color, right? So if I change the colors, like if I change the colors on the model, the colors on the texture change, right? But if I change the bump, and the bump is something different, then I could either raise these to make them look raised, or I can cut them inward. Let me just change that brush setting so it's a little bit easier to see. So you'll kind of see, like, the dirt here bumps, like, it doesn't actually, but from a glance it kind of dents in or it bumps up and it looks like it has these cuts in it. These are all just texture stuff, like texture maps. So I'm going to attempt to redo this in that other scene, but in a lower pixel art kind of resolution. So yeah, let's try and make some mushrooms. I don't know, this is a this is a weird live stream, but I don't know. I just want to kind of talk my way through and explain what I'm doing. And I already said that, but anyway. Let's first things first. Let's just hide all these for now because they're kind of in the way and I don't really need to see them. And let's just get rid of that texture. And I guess this asset browser could, I don't know, I'll just leave it as is. I'll just make the screen bigger. Let's start modeling a mushroom. So one thing I want to keep in mind here actually is I want to keep that jagged look to it. If I do too smooth of a mushroom, it might not fit the art style. So that's just something I'm going to have to keep in mind here. So first things first, Shift A, add a mesh. Let's add a circle. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is reduce the polygon count because I just explained I want to keep it lower poly, like low resolution. So I can't remember how many polygons this barrel had, or like how many sides to it, but I'm going to assume it was 10. Let's just go with 10. That's good enough for me. So my camera's kind of all over the place, so I'm just going to reset this a little bit. I'm going to highlight the circle. I'm going to hit, what do you call that? The period key on your numpad, and I'm just going to focus in on it again. So when I start zooming around, it's centered and it's a little bit easier to see now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit tab, go into edit mode, so you can see I'm in edit mode by these dots. I'm going to select all the dots and hit F, and that's going to make me a solid face here. So the next thing I'm going to do is go back into edit mode, hit 3, I'll just move that cursor away. So if I hit 3, I can select the whole face, which is all these dots, which is all these lines. Anyway, I'll click the face, and what I'll just do now is I'll start making the base. So I'll try and explain as I go. It's kind of hard to explain. I'll hit E to extrude, hold the middle mouse button so I lock in one axis, and I'll hold the control key just so I have like it snaps to that grid in the background. So next thing I'll do, let me just bring it out. Let me just try and freehand it a little bit here. So can't even remember how I made a mushroom stem. I'm gonna hit Control R to add an edge loop here. Alt S just to expand it out a little bit. Okay, so that's gonna be the base of the mushroom. So I'll select that face again. Actually, it might be easier to see if I just have it in. Sorry, I'm just gonna change up the settings just a little bit, just so it's a little bit easier to see what I'm doing, so it's not so confusing. Just adding like these, yeah, like that. So now you can clearly see that bulges out, and that's okay. I'm gonna take this face, and I'm gonna extrude it up again, but I'm gonna keep it as straight. So already I can see this is not really looking like a mushroom, so I'm going to take that top face, squeeze it in by scaling it a little bit, and I can add in another loop cut. I mean, I don't want to add, like, it doesn't matter, like if I'm doing game assets, I should be conscious of these, like the polygon counts, but for the most part I think it's okay if I add in a few extra loop cuts just to get finer details here. So I'm just gonna so I select this whole loop, like that whole ring, by holding Alt and then clicking on them, and then I can hit Alt S just to bulge them out, tap double G just to slide them around a little bit. It's kind of making sense, or no? Probably not, but and yeah, this is a horrible base to a mushroom, but it's, I don't know, it's pretty big mushroom, I guess. So I'm just gonna extrude it again. S to scale it out a bit more, and can't believe I'm forgetting the steps to make this mushroom, but let me see if I remember here. So then I hit E again and bring up that cap. You know what? I completely forgot how to do this, but oh whatever, I'll just figure it out. I don't know, there was some, like, it's probably stupid of me to try and explain what I'm doing when I really don't even understand it, but there was some technique to, like, yeah, to, so, like, I have, like, this lampshade kind of effect. I just bring up the loop, and then what I do is I just S to scale it inward, E to extrude it, S to scale it in some more, and then E to extrude, S to scale. I guess that last part doesn't really need to be there, so... Yeah, I guess, that's my mushroom. It's, the base is a little bit too kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit thick, to be honest, so I'm just gonna skinny it. I'm just gonna make it a little bit skinnier, so it's... This is a horrible example. This is a horrible mushroom, but, yeah, I don't know. I guess the whole point of this live stream is, like, I'm not really trying to... I don't know. I never really had the intention of trying to teach what I was doing or explain it, because honestly, I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain sometimes. Yeah, I guess that should be a good enough shape for a mushroom. Why not? Looks like a mushroom to me. So what I can do here is I can right click and shade smooth. So yeah, it already kind of looks like a, you know, a little mushroom. It's not bad. And again, I want to keep it jagged, so I don't think I'm going to shade it smooth, which kind of doesn't make sense because I just said I would. But yeah, okay, so I should explain these things too. There's a thing called a subdivision surface modifier, and what that does is it smooths out the surfaces. It kind of, so if you can kind of see here, I have this one face, okay? This modifier set at level 1 will double that face and smooth it out a little bit more, so it just looks like it basically just adds more geometry to the mesh to make it much more, like, I don't know, smoother, I guess? So if I click back to object mode, if I shade smooth, it looks a lot cleaner. So there's a little shortcut here for these subdivisions. So pay attention to this levels viewport. If I hold control and hit 2, it becomes even smoother. If I hit 3 and 4, it just becomes more and more smoother. But let's just keep it down to, let's just keep it at 1. And then I'll shade it flat. But I don't know, I kind of like the jagged look, to be honest. So I'm not really gonna mess with that. I was just trying to explain how to make it look more like a mushroom and I guess less like a lampshade. But this is good enough for me. Okay, that's my mushroom model. What I'm gonna do now is I'm going to give it a material. So let's go new, and we'll call this... I don't know, I was gonna just call it mushroom, but I guess pixel underscore mushroom works for me. So, as you can see right now, if I go back into these settings here, if I go back to flat shading, and if I go back to texture mode, now I can see all those again, but I'm still seeing these weird cavity lines. I'm gonna take that off now, because I don't think we need that. I just wanted to do it for, actually, you know what, I'll leave it on. I don't see why not. Helps show you, like, the different geometry that I'm working with. So with that being said, the last thing I'm going to check here before I actually get into the shading stuff is I'm going to check face orientation. So just a little note, if I were to mess around, okay, so I'm not gonna go into the details. It basically says, like, if this is all blue, it's good, but if it's inverted, like in a weird way, like if I stretched it out and rotated it weird, then you can see some of these red parts, and those are the inside of the face, and you don't want to paint on the inside. You always want to paint on the outside of the faces, so it's all good. I didn't mess up the geometry, which honestly I thought I did, but I didn't, so it should be able to paint it. So we added a material to this. If I change this, well, nothing happens, so I have to go into this mode. But, okay, let me explain. This is just the flat models, and right now I have this little option right now to give it flat lighting, so that, you know, it's not really affected by these shadows. And I want it to display, so that's the material on them, right? That base color. It doesn't have a material base color, it just has textures, so... Look, I don't know. I just do flat shading and I just do texture because that's what the tutorial taught me, okay? So with that being said, I'll come back to this mushroom. So what I'm going to do is I'll open up the shader editor here. I'll just give it a bit more space. And we'll come here to look at the mushroom without any of these grids or anything. So let me go to the shader editor. And we are on Pixel Mushroom. We don't need this principal BSDF shader, so I'm just going to delete that. Instead, I'm going to add in a image texture. Just add in the image texture. And I will add in the emission shader. So just like I explained at the beginning, I'm going to... I can't even plug it in. So right now this needs a new texture to work with. So let's create something entirely new. Let's call it Pixel Mushroom. And let's work with, you know, I guess 64 by 64 works for me. It gives me a nice resolution to play with without it being too intense. And we'll just give it a nice flat color of like this beige kind of color. That's okay with me. Okay. So we have a beige mushroom just sitting on the ground right now, and we want to paint over it, so I can switch this back to UV editor. Okay, so okay, right now I selected everything, so I'm just gonna select this, hit tab, hit A. Oh, before I get into the UV stuff, let me just quickly... Let me open up the image that I want to work on, Pixel Mushroom. So right now it doesn't have any UV images to it. So let me see if I remember this right. There's two approaches. So the pixel art tutorial I followed, he just did that cube project thing, which, you know, it lines up to the pixels and all that. The other tutorial I followed talked about adding seams to these textures. It's a little bit advanced, and I'll be honest, I don't really understand how to explain it, but I'll just try and explain it this way. So if I unwrap it as is right now, it's kind of all over the place, right? So again, if each space corresponds to a different part of the, like each of these each of these coordinates are represented as like on part of the image. Again, I suck at explaining this. I'm getting a lot of bots here. What I'm trying to do is I don't want all of this all over the place because it's kind of a waste from what I learned. So I'm gonna add a seam here. So how does this work? Actually, before I add the seam, let me try the cube projection method. So I don't know how this works. Again, I really don't know what I'm doing here, but okay, I'll just try and explain this. I select all of this, hit U, cube projection. And this is all selected. Come to UV, pack islands, space it 0.05. So they have a little bit of spacing between them because we don't want them to overlap. If I paint the mushroom cap red, I don't want the stem to also be red. Okay? And then what I'll do is, they're still all selected. We pack the islands neat and tidy. Hold Shift S, and then move over to selected pixels. So now they line up on the grid properly. So let's try this method out first, because I just want to see how well it's going to work. So if I wanted to select just the mushroom cap for now. So holding Alt, I select so that's one face, two face. If I select in between them, that edge, and I hold down Alt, I select all of them. So let's do that on okay, so I'm holding Alt and I hold Shift so I can select another loop and another loop, and then just that top one. So these are the only the only faces I want to paint on right now. So with these selected, I'll hold Control Tab, go into texture paint mode, and I will turn on the paint mask. So everything else gets blocked out as white, and I can only paint on this color right now. So I'll come up to this brush setting and let's just make it red, like a red mushroom cap, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is fill the color. Oh, I just got to check a few. Oh. I just want to check it. So right now I have all this extra stuff here. Instead of constantly working here and then getting sidetracked, I can just hit slash on the numpad, or slash on the, what do you call it, forward slash on the keyboard, like your question mark button, and that basically isolates it, so it's a little bit easier to work with. So back to the mushroom cap. I'm gonna fill it as a red color. So notice, pay attention to this color right here. It's an ugly yellow color. And the reason being is each of these brushes will have a different color. I guess not all of them, but brush and fill have different colors. So I wanted to paint a red color first, right? But it didn't work out that way because, yeah, not important. Let's just go to this, fill, make it red. Now, these textures aren't exactly, they're not exactly pixel perfect, if you can say it that way. So let me just think about this. What I'm gonna do is let me go back to the shader editor real quick. We have the pixel mushroom. Let me just make that the UV editor really quick. We'll go pixel mushroom. So this image here is being mapped onto this object. And right now it looks blurry because of this interpolation method. If I go to closest, it's much more fine-tuned. And that's pretty much all I wanted to explain. So if I go into here now, and I already messed up. So go into texture paint mode. Yeah, okay, so I can only paint on these. Now, or apparently not, so let me just redo that selection really quick. And then go into texture paint mode. Okay. The reason these are all jagged right now is so if I only look at this one right here, you see that jaggedness? Like I'm struggling to even like come up with something to explain. I can't just paint over it because okay, I'll just shut up and explain what I'm doing. This is my UV editor, this is my image editor, and I can go to paint here. So it's a little bit tricky, but what I could do for these faces, I could either leave them like that and just paint in the rest of it. Right, now it's like a nice flat face, so I could do this. Go back to texture paint. So all these faces right here, like these are the two faces for the mushroom cap. I could just shade those in as red. And oh yeah, and down here too. And that's kind of, like, it works. I mean, it's a little bit wasteful, but... Oh, and these two, I guess. There's more. This is why it's important to kind of keep your coordinates all organized, so you can just work on one shape. Right now, they're kind of broken out and all over the place, and that's not really a good use of this texture space, because this whole mushroom is using this one texture, and look how much we already used for the for the color alone. So that's kind of a bad example. That's a bad way to go about it. So let's try and correct that. And you notice some of these faces share the same space that the cap does, so some of those textures will bleed out into them. So let's try another method. Let us try doing that seam thing. So first things first, I'm going to select everything, go back into texture paint, and I'm going to make it one uniform color, just so it's not all blotchy and... I guess it is blotchy. I'll come into here and I'll just paint everything as... red. Okay, it's a red mushroom now, I don't care. So I'm going to try a different method here. I'm going to mark a seam. So I'm going to select this whole edge loop, this bottom one right here, and I'm going to hit U and mark seam. So in object mode, oh, I guess red was a bad example. Oh man. Okay, let me just change that color back really quick. I'll make it a green mushroom. What I'm trying to explain is that there's like a red line here where that seam was marked. It's just a bad example because red on red doesn't really show up very well. But you can kind of see that red outline. That's the seam that I'm going to use for my mushroom cap. And then, if I remember this correctly, I'm going to take this whole line. Or no, it doesn't come to the cap. I think it comes to the stem. And then I'm going to mark that as a seam. So you can imagine this gets split open right down the middle, as does this, which I guess doesn't really have a middle. Anyway, let me just try and explain this. This is really hard to explain because I don't understand it. I mark two seams, and then I unwrap it. Yeah, there we go, I think. And I, wow, that's really bad. Yeah, okay, I don't think I really unwrapped this properly. Let me just see here. There is some method involved here. Like, this is why I try to practice what I learn before I actually try and live stream and teach it. Even though I shouldn't, even though I don't understand it, but yeah, let's just see what happens. So if I do that again, and I unwrap it, yeah, okay, there we go, there we go, there we go. So what I was missing was this cap. Like, let me try and explain it this way. I'm just gonna remove that stem. I'm just gonna unhighlight all the stem. This cap and this part. I don't think I marked the seam properly, to be honest. I think it needs to go a little bit more, so I'm just gonna... Where's that edge line? Right there. I'll take that, that, and then I'll mark that as a seam as well. So I think this might work. I don't know. Okay, like, yeah, these are my two portions now, so without touching anything, this is honestly harder than I thought. I mean, when I did it the other day, it was so easy, but now it's difficult. I'm trying to demonstrate, like, the different pieces of... You know what? It doesn't matter, okay? Like, I don't know how to do this, to be honest. This is kind of confusing. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep trying to paint this, I guess. Yeah, let's just paint the mushroom cap. We'll paint it red, so I'll go to edit mode. Select this, this has to be in face select. I just want to paint these right now, so I'll texture paint. I'll have my mask on so I can only paint on these. You know what I'm thinking? Like, I think it might be because these aren't lined up to the grid properly. So if I select it, no. Honestly, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know how to, I don't know how to do this properly, to be honest. I mean, like, I have an idea of what I'm trying to do, but I don't know, once you start getting a little few, like, once you start getting more complex shapes, it's kind of hard to, let me try one thing. Like, working on cubes is completely fine, like, I'm completely fine with that. It's not even hard, but when it comes to this pack islands, I guess that makes it pixelated. I don't know, this is a really bad example. Like, yeah, you'd think I would know how to do this and explain it, but I mean, like, honestly, this mushroom is just... it's just confusing me at this point. You know what it might be? it might be the image size might be a little bit too low resolution. So what I can do is I can come into the shader editor, and instead of this pixel mushroom, I'm gonna open up a new image. We'll go to our grid. So maybe 64 by 64 is a little bit too small to work with based on the size of this mushroom here. I'm just gonna do one thing. I just applied the scale just so it's nice and uniform, but my idea is I need to use a wider grid than 64, so I will try 96. So this now needs to change to 96, and that needs to become, what is that, my UV editor? So yeah, I guess image editor here. And that also has to become the bigger 96 grid. So let's go back into object mode. And I'm just going to select everything in, I'm just going to clear those seams. I'm going to try the cube projection method again. I don't know. I feel like that cube projection method works for doing the pixel art stuff, but the other seam stuff I was doing was more of like those mushrooms I showed you before, because I didn't know anything about this pixel art stuff. I'll just pack these islands, Shift S, selected to pixels. Oh, and I have to do this one technique. So I have to recalculate these texture sizes. So I'm going off of 96 by 96, and I set my thing here. Maybe that'll work. So as you can see, what this texture is showing me is, like down here, right? That's going to appear just fine. They're nice and lined up and everything. But these ones over here are a little bit skewed, and they're kind of hard to work with. Like they won't come out clean. Like it won't be like a clean, flat pixel thing. It won't be like this. You see how these line up in the squares? The moment you start having these edges, it kind of messes with it. So there is a little trick that I know of that might get it to work, but we'll just struggle with this a little bit more. And then maybe I'll move on to making like a sword or something, and not worrying about the pixel art stuff. Like for whatever reason, I'm just caught up on this pixel art stuff right now. So it's a little bit of me struggling and a little bit of me trying to like overcome what it's like. I don't know, I just want to figure this out, to be honest, so. Let's just shade it a flat, okay, green. Well, make it red. I like red. And then what I'll do is, so this is my image editor. I'll come into paint mode. And I have to go, okay. That needs to be on the brush. That way I can start painting in. So I'll just zoom in a little bit. Make sure my opacity is at 1. Or it doesn't have to be. I can reduce it down a little bit, and I'll just start filling in those gaps. I'll make it to 1. Why not? I mean, this is like the quick fix I could think of for the pixel art stuff, so it... I don't know what's... Yeah, okay, I guess it's this side that corresponds to it. And, like, I honestly don't know of a better way to do this, because my understanding is like this isn't, like these coordinates don't exactly line up to these pixels without them being squares, so yeah, I don't know, I really don't know how to fix this little problem, but here's my little solution to it. But I'm gonna switch over to doing to not doing pixel art, because it's like, I don't know, if I do cubes and stuff, it's kind of easy to do, but if I, like, the moment I start doing a little bit more advanced geometry, it just gets kind of confusing, to be honest. Like, I mean, I only just started doing this the other day, so I'm not exactly well versed in this, I guess you would say. And yeah, I guess I could have done the underside too. So take that, and yeah, I think the inside of this I can expand that out a little bit. No, actually, no, I'll leave it. I want the inside of all of this to be that beige color. So that I just want to be red as well. So I'll just go back into texture paint and we'll just make this, we'll just fill it. Just fill it as red and just try and fix these little errors. But yeah, I mean, what I'm doing right now is really sloppy, so I mean, it's kind of a bad example. But if you just bear with me for a few more minutes, I'll switch over and we will... Well, I can make a low poly sword, right? I mean, kind of like making those. And then I'll use that, I won't do the pixel art thing, like I might. It won't be like this, so you're just watching me color in these stupid shapes. I missed a spot, but it's fine. And then I'll just take the bottom portion of this. So first I'm going to highlight the whole cap, and then I'm just going to hit Control I to select the opposite side of it, texture paint that, and then I could start, you know, painting on however I wanted it to be. So I'm just going to fill, and I can't remember where that color went, but we'll just make it again. It's not a big deal. Something like that. And as you can see, I have to go in and start... Oops. I just have to reduce my brush size. Yeah, I mean, what I'm doing is, you know, this example sucks. Like, this is not, like, good pixel art, but, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I'm not too satisfied with this. This is like a horrible way to try and explain what I'm doing. Let's just make a quick mushroom, okay? Let's just change the fall off a little bit and... Actually, it's my brush size too, so I could change out how my brush functions. If I go to stroke, and if I go to, I think it was dots, so I could start doing like these. You know what? Okay, let's just leave this example. Like this is terrible. This mushroom's good enough for me. I'll just, I don't know. I'll delete it later or something like that. And let me go into object mode and unhide everything. So yeah, this is a waste of time. I'm not gonna lie. This is actually just a waste of time at this point. So, with that being said, let's just switch gears and, oh wait. It kind of has a cool effect to it. I kind of like that cavity thing. I'll try and, I'll leave it on. It's not a big deal. Good shade smooth and... I don't know, I feel like an idiot trying to struggle with this on stream, trying to figure it out. So I'm just going to do something that I'm more familiar with and not struggle with it. But you know what I'm going to do actually? I'm just going to listen to something, zone out, stop talking because I've talked quite a bit, and I'm just going to start modeling something. So like I always say, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I don't really think anyone's watching, or if they have questions, they're not asking. So I'm gonna shut up. You've heard me talk for like way too long now, and I'm running out of things to say. So I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna leave a link to this guy's channel, like another guy I found. This Slopes Gaming guy. He's actually I don't know. I really like the videos he puts out. He does like I guess he's a game collector or something, but he does like these complete history on these titles. So yeah, that being said, I'm just going to listen to some F-Zero history stuff. I'm going to go silent and just model out a little low poly sword. And then I'm going to do a texture effect like I did with those mushrooms. Not pixel art, but I'll show you as I explain. Let me just get into this.
If you like the video, then please consider supporting Slopes Game Room on Patreon. There are plenty of video games set in the future. It almost goes as far back as gaming itself. Now for me, it doesn't get any better than Wipeout 2097. I spent an absurd amount of time with this game, as did plenty of my friends with Extreme G. But those N64 gamers also had another futuristic racer up their sleeves that constantly tackled my prodigy blasting grey beast, and that was of course F-Zero X. Which, would you believe it, was my first introduction to this brilliant series. F-Zero is absolutely legendary, a game series that makes the world, including myself, constantly ask the same question every single time a new Nintendo machine is released. When's a new F-Zero game coming out? When's a new F-Zero game coming out? When's a new F-Zero game coming out? Nintendo answered our prayers with Metroid Prime and sort of did with the 2D games too. And now Nintendo, you gotta do it again. Make this complete history defunct with a nice Nintendo Switch announcement. But until that day when it inevitably doesn't happen, you can join me as we take a look at the complete history of the F-Zero franchise. Well, we'll be looking at the game's development, its rejected beginnings, its surprising mascot, and of course, the games. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna start a heavily Nintendo themed video by saying that the best F-Zero game was made by Sega. Oh, come on. It's me, of course I'm gonna say that. Feel free to let me know how wrong I am in the comments. The reason I say this is that this was the days of the incredible GameCube, probably one of my favourite Nintendo systems ever made. And I'll admit, although it is my favourite in this series, it would be nothing without what came before it. And with that, well, I think we're in fact getting a little ahead of ourselves. So, let's go back to the beginning. The Nintendo Entertainment System, aka, get ready for it, the NES. Yep. This bad boy was rather popular, don't you know, and was easily the surefire winner for the majority of the gaming world outside of Europe and Brazil, that is. Now, unlike Sega's perfect example of not being able to sit still during the 16-bit generation with failed add-on after failed add-on, the Nintendo generation before this was quite the opposite. You see, during that 8-bit era, the mighty N was doing so bloody well with this ugly grey brick and its far sexier red and cream design that they didn't really see much of a point in upgrading it. In fact, they was advised against this exact thing after the struggling mess that was the disk system by the big wigs up top. If it's not broke, then why bother fixing it, right? Well, I suppose looking back this might seem a little stupid. I mean, what was Nintendo gonna do in all honesty? Just stay in the 8-bit generation forever? Obviously not. They would have had to eventually upgrade, but like I said, during the mid to late 80s, they simply thought, why bother? I mean, come on, even in the Genesis' early days, before the release of that blue single-eyed alien looking thing, Nintendo was still ahead of the game in North America. But in Japan, it had become quite the different story. Not because of Sega, but instead it was that other company, NEC. Yep, the PC Engine had already come out and it had done what nobody had predicted or thought was possible. It actually started to take a lead and even beat Nintendo in sales. Now, obviously, like I said, this wasn't the case in the States, and again, like I said, Nintendo's 8-bit wonder was actually beating Sega's 16-bit wonder, as well as NEC's American offering of the PC Engine, the TurboGrafx 16. But the big question was, how long was that gonna honestly last when the mighty Blue was pumping out advertisements like this? Ooh, Nintendo, it's time to buck up your ideas, sunshine, and get to work on your almighty 16-bit rival. Now, this all may just sound like I'm poking fun at Nintendo. After all, it is pretty common knowledge that I, DJ Slope, that 34-year-old nerd with too many trips to Sega under his belt, still lives in the fantasy zone land of the mid-90s, where talks of the Mega Drive versus Super Nintendo ruled the playground. But come on, let's get real here. Even though the Mega Drive is still my favourite system of all time, and although it did beat Nintendo to the market by 2 whole years, even I can admit that coming out second most definitely has its advantages. Technology was rapidly moving along in the late 80s, and by the year 1990, the year that this bad boy was released, they most definitely had played the fashionably late card. This curvy upgrade could pump out more colours than Sega's offering, it had arguably the best controller of that generation, and it had far more advanced sound capabilities too. Although Sega did have its rivals in that department, didn't it? But with all of that, it still had one sneaky trick up its sleeve, and that was of course Mode 7. Ah, yes, Mode 7. The Mega Drive had blast processing, whatever that is, and the Super Nintendo had Mode 7. Whatever that is. Of course you know what Mode 7 is. I think I may be the only channel on YouTube that hasn't talked about it up to this date. Well, just in case this is the first video you ever played on the big red button, allow me to break my Mode 7 cherry and explain. This is a Super Nintendo game. Just like the competition and what came before it, it's rather simple. You got your main sprites that you control, the world around them that you interact with, enemies, obstacles, backgrounds, all the usual traits. Besides certain games looking better than others, not a hell of a lot of differences have really occurred since David Crane's Pitfall and Nintendo's later Mario releases. Technically I mean. But keeping an eye on the background for a minute, besides improving the layers, aka the parallax scrolling, the Super Nintendo had this Mode 7 thing, which, as you may have guessed, was the 7th mode available to developers that differentiated the system from other platforms. To put it simply, this 7th mode allowed the dev team to be able to rotate and scale the pixelated background on a scanline by scanline basis in an attempt to make a sort of fake 3D effect. Did it actually work though? Of course it bloody did. It's what you constantly hear about from SNES fans. And, well, fair play. For a 16-bit system, it really did help push this system away from the competition, and it was something that was constantly raved about in Nintendo publications such as the infamous Nintendo Power magazine. So, with this sexy new feature inside its sexy new system, whilst companies like Sega were slowly chipping away at the Big Red's bottom line with rather obscure but obviously brilliant licenses, Nintendo needed a game that would show all of those die-hard Nintendo fans that were still waiting to upgrade what this new exotic system could actually do. The inspiration for the game that we're talking about today actually came from the previously released Japan exclusive game Famicom Grand Prix F1 Race. If you think it looks basic, well, you wouldn't be alone, as Nintendo of America thought so too. Apparently it just wasn't cool enough, hence why it stayed in Japan. The game was created by HAL Labs, most well known for the Kirby, Mother and Smash Brother games. Famicom Grand Prix F1 Race, which we'll now call Fukpa for 1R, was headed by Kazanobu Shimizu, and the rejection of this new creation lit a bit of a bonfire underneath him to go back to Japan and try again. But before our wounded Shimizu-san went home with Fukpa for 1R still in hand, whilst he was in the States, he decided to go to the cinema to perk himself up. Tim Burton's Batman movie was doing the rounds at the time, and Shimizu-san liked what he saw. Nintendo of America wanted cool, and come on, who's cooler than the bloody Batman, he thought. So, after buying several Batman comics, he flew back to Japan and showed his colleague Yoshinari Nishida the awesome superhero. This was the beginning of something awesome, as Nishida-san was one of the team members tasked with playing around with this new Mode 7 feature that we spoke about earlier. And as soon as Shimizu-san saw what was being done on the screen alongside his cool as Batman comics, he thought, this is it. I thought if we use that Batman and Mode 7 to make a racing game, it would shock everyone. As you may have guessed, going from this to this, well, it didn't happen instantly. Originally, the cars had big fat wheels and looked more like Hot Wheel cars rather than futuristic hovercrafts. Why did this change? Well, to put it simply, the crazy amounts of different sprites needed to simply turn one of these vehicles was staggeringly high. And the pixel artist responsible for this, one Takiya Imamura, realised that if you simply take the spinning wheels off, well, that's a lot of time saved. And quite simply put, that was that. We decided to lose the tyres and have the racers hover. On top of this, it turned out that trying to render 3D buildings for the racers to drive through on top of the shifted Mode 7 background proved almost impossible. So, they came up with the idea to simply remove those too. And, I don't know, let's say it's a floating track above a city. In the future, right? Yeah, that all fits the setting. As you may have guessed, the whole thing came together quite organically from this point moving forward. And the setting of F-Zero was simply a result of the new exciting Mode 7 technology and the limitations of the system itself. Setting the game in the future, adding some super fast speed, some incredible jumps, it all just fit. Nintendo of America wanted something cooler than a top-down Formula 1 game with Mario on the front cover. But I don't think anyone expected a Batman-inspired futuristic hovercraft racer, right? Thanks, Tim. Can you imagine if America said yes to Fukpuff 1R instead? Well, thankfully, they didn't. Everything was just joining together smoothly, so much so that Shigeru Miyamoto, who often outsourced quite a bit of Nintendo's work to third-party companies, felt that this newfangled Mode 7 game was best kept entirely in-house. It took, surprisingly, 7 people and Shigsy's input 15 months to create this new style of gameplay and fantastic new world, and thankfully, it was finished just in time for the Super Famicom's launch in Japan alongside Pilot Wings. Did it do well? Of course it bloody did! So, before we get into this guy's origins, which is probably one of the most bizarre pieces of this entire complete history, let's take a look at the game itself. F-Zero released all the way back in November 21st, 1990 in Japan, August the following year in North America, and during 1992 in PAL regions. It had a lot to live up to, and it nailed it. The futuristic high-coloured super fast speed looks great. It has an amazing soundtrack which also showed off what the new system was capable of, and best of all for me, it's go go go. Yep, choose your driver, choose your league, and boom, 400 kilometers an hour, apparently, whilst you listen to some high quality pumping beats. If you want story, then you're out of luck. That is unless you get the original box, where Nintendo wasted no expense in blowing up the world of F-Zero for those that actually wanted to go a little further looking it all up. Which is why I like this approach. I can't get enough when the story is told to you in a beautiful comic strip setup. Don't bother downloading this one for the Virtual Console, guys. You gotta buy the original. What else is there to say about this first release that can't be picked up by simply looking at it? Nothing really. If this looks like a fun game, that's because it is. If it looks like a hard game at some points, that's because it is. This is a game that showed the world what the new kid on the block was capable of. And other than the fact that it isn't exactly overfilling with content, probably the only negative I have to say about the game in all honesty, it's a game, like I said, that holds up rather brilliantly. If you've got a SNES, then get this game. It's an absolute must-own, and if you ask me, when I see Captain Falcon, I am always reminded of the brilliant Super Nintendo. Even more than this unshaven mess. But why is that exactly? After all, you don't see him in the game, do you? Is it simply because F-Zero was a launch title? Well, yes, that does indeed play a role in this thought process, but it's this guy's origins that really does connect him with the 16-bit wonder. You see, when this game was in its final stages of completion, Inamura-san was creating several illustrations for the game when all of a sudden, someone expressed a desire to make a mascot for the Super NES with a name like Captain something. So I started thinking about a character that would suit the colours of the Super Famicom controller, with some red and blue and yellow. This new character for the Super Nintendo and the final stages of F-Zero's illustrations all came together at the same time. It was only when the fruits of their labour was shown to Nintendo of America, who absolutely loved it all by the way, that they decided to change the Super Nintendo mascot into the F-Zero mascot, even if he was only ever seen on the box art and in the manual. There you go, Nintendo fans. You almost had a cigar-smoking, long-chinned 1930s pilot look-alike as the mascot for one of the most well-loved gaming systems of all time. How's that?
Nothing prepares you for F-Zero, created for the new Super Nintendo Entertainment System. You won't believe the power. You won't believe the control. You won't believe the jumps, the curves, or the feeling you get until you experience it for yourself.
Wow, that's fast.
F-Zero for the ultimate G-Force, only on the next generation from Nintendo. Now you're racing with power, superpower.
So, with fans loving F-Zero, critics loving F-Zero, and even rival console owners loving it too, although I doubt they would ever say that, obviously, a sequel was a no-brainer, and sadly, the Super Nintendo never got one. Well, I suppose if you lived in Japan and had the Satellaview, then I suppose you could say you actually got two sequels. Confused? Well, like I said, if you happen to live in Japan and happen to own a Satellaview and happen to download the what is essentially DLC BS F-Zero Grand Prix games during the short couple of hour time slots, then you can get pretty much the same game, plus an extra difficulty mode and a few extra tracks and different ships. Some of its game's content has been lost due to nobody having the data left over on the downloadable cartridge. However, some of it is still available, and because of this must-have, it's become a bit of a favourite among the bootleg selling market. The real important thing to note here is that F-Zero never stopped being an innovative tool used by the big end to show off whatever hardware or new idea they was working on at the time. The 16-bit generation was blown away by this, and the hungry Japanese market was, well, I assume, blown away by this too. And as you can imagine, it wasn't long before we got entry number 3.
F0X. 700 km/h. 1000 km/h. F0X, jeu ultra rapide. 1500 km/h. F0X sur Nintendo 64, vous n'en reviendrez pas.
It was during the development of Mario Kart 64 in 1996 when Shigsy decided that the time and the technology was right for another entry. So he got several programmers who recently worked on the beloved Wave Race 64 game and began development on F-Zero 64, which will obviously change its name eventually to F-Zero-X, the first ever 60 frames a second racing game with 30 simultaneous players. Quite the accomplishment, right? Well, to get the system to actually do this, they had no choice but to make the game look as basic as possible. It's not bad looking, it's just incredibly minimalistic looking. The ships are simple shapes and the environments that you race in have almost no textures. It features all that early 3G gen stuff like fog to cover up draw distances and super wide tracks so you don't get to see much of the backgrounds. However, graphics aside, the game gets everything else spot on. The music is pumping, the tracks are insane, featuring all new corkscrews and loops, truly bringing the franchise into the next generation, and it won't take long before you completely forget about those bland graphics, because when a game runs as smoothly and as hectically as this one does, it's gonna be the last thing on your mind. Nintendo, yet again, nailed this release in my eyes. And sure, it was a bit of a risky move to remove something that was pretty much a key selling feature of the N64, but by doing so, they had a product that could show off how much nail-biting on the edge of your seat action could be had with this machine. Oh yes, Japan always does these adverts better, don't they? So, F-Zero-X, a worthy sequel, yes. A worthy purchase, hell yes. And considering it's an N64 game, it's actually not all that expensive either on the second-hand market, which sadly can't be said for its sequel. Remember that's the television's slight upgrade on the first game? Well, Nintendo decided to use the F-Zero license again to show off this thing. The Nintendo 64 DD, an expansion kit for the F-Zero-X called the F-Zero-X expansion kit, obviously, which was released for the system but only in Japan. It's got a couple of extra tracks, you got a ship editor, and easily best of all, you got the track editor. These are rather impressive editors by all accounts, and are fairly close to what the programmers themselves used when making the original game. But like I said, it was Japan exclusive, and is now not only the best game for the 64 DD, but also one of the most expensive due to the system being one of Nintendo's biggest flops, right up there with the Virtual Boy, which by the way, also had an F-Zero game for it. Although I would wager that a copy of that one would be worth a hell of a lot more, due to it never being released with only a few images to go on, which basically meant that F-Zero Maximum Velocity became the first game in the series to be released on a handheld system. And what an awesome looking game for such a brilliant system it was. Yet again, Nintendo had released a game that just wouldn't have been possible before on handheld. F-Zero Maximum Velocity is the sequel that classic SNES players wanted to get all those years ago, completely bringing back the style of the classic games with plenty more tracks and vehicles to choose from, made this an absolute must for fans of the original. However, if you was like me and you didn't own the SNES, oh, sorry, there I go again, and this was the first time you ever owned an F-Zero game, well then, you might struggle a little bit. Maximum Velocity is created for people that have already played the original. It might as well be called F-Zero Extreme Hard Mode. It just felt unfairly hard for a newcomer like myself that weren't willing to put a stupid amount of time into it. But let's be honest, that's the case with every addictive racer out there, right? I'm not alone in thinking this, am I? You got fun racing games that straight out of the gate are fun to play, and then you got games that you really need to learn before you get the maximum enjoyment out of them. And Maximum Velocity is one of those games. Every single F-Zero requires a slight learning curve to master, but this is slightly steeper. Don't be put off, it's not a bad game, it is a great game, but be aware it is a game that you are probably going to want to purchase after playing the original.
Game Boy Advance.
ロケットスタート。ブラストターン。インがいた。いけ。シャン。よし。はえ。カートリッジ一つで4人で遊べる。
マシンと一つになる快感。テクニックを磨いて 0.01 秒を争え。ゲームボーイアドバンス F-Zero。
Game Boy Advance, console quality gaming anywhere.
On Monday, the 18th of February, Nintendo of Japan made a very special announcement, and that was the release of the Triforce. No, not that Triforce. This Triforce. What the hell is this? Well, it's a brand new arcade board based on GameCube hardware. Nervous? Well, I can understand why. I've spoken many a times in the past about Nintendo's dodgy arcade days. Well, no need to fear here, because the name Triforce actually implies that Nintendo wasn't going to be the only company working on this unique hardware, because they brought Namco and Sega along for the ride too. Can you imagine that? Hardware that has 3 awesome developers working on it at the same time? Huh. Well, imagine no more, because the very Nintendo named hardware did in fact exist. The aim of the Triforce was threefold: to expand the video game market, create a less expensive development environment for the high-cost arcade sector, and offer new ways to play video games linking the arcade and the home market. Speculation quickly spread across the internet about what game would be announced, with Soul Calibur 2 being at the top of the list. And then, just 4 days later at the AOU Expo in Japan on Friday the 22nd of February 2002, it was announced that F-Zero AX, a brand new F-Zero arcade game created by Sega's very own Amusement Vision, most well known for Super Monkey Ball, was in development. A strange idea, right? Well, no, it wasn't. Sega were arguably the king of the arcades, creating the most popular arcade racers ever made, which is why it was actually the perfect fit. But get this, F-Zero AX wasn't the only game that they was releasing. because my favourite game in the series was also put out on the GameCube called F-Zero GX. And if you happen to take a memory card with a save slot from this game and put it into this arcade game, then you can even unlock extra tracks for you to play at home. Gah, remember when arcades used to be this cool?
Customize your own machine and race through 20 gravity-defying courses at ridiculous speeds. F-Zero GX. The future of racing is in your hands. Only for Nintendo GameCube. Rated T for Teen. GameCube.
So, F-Zero GX. Why do I love it so? Other than the obvious. Well, firstly, it looks stunning, keeping up that brilliant 60 frames a second that the game before it managed to keep a hold of, as well as completely expanding the look of the game whilst playing too. An F-Zero game has never looked this stunning, and they're going to have a hard job topping this one with any future entries. That is if they ever decide to make a new one. But on top of the look and design, the gameplay is also a perfect blend between the crazy track types found in X, merged with the tight twists and turns that you need to master from the original. It doesn't take long to get used to the game, but just like all classic arcade races, you are going to want to put some serious time into working out every single track layout if you want to beat your best times. Oh, and can we give a quick shout out to the soundtrack too? Oh my god, it's so good, and it's exactly what you would expect. Hard EDM over here and hard rock over there. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Perfection. You got 30 vehicles with plenty of customizations, you can buy upgrades and strangely extra chapters in the very cheesy storyline. Basically, there is something for everyone in this game, but especially for those hardcore fans of futuristic racers. In a nutshell, it's the perfect way to go out for F-Zero. But would you believe it? 2 more games were released, both based on the F-Zero anime. Now, guys, whilst we look at F-Zero GP Legend and the Japan exclusive F-Zero Climax, both of which were released on the Game Boy Advance, let me ask you this. Are you getting bored of this yet? No, not my video. The game series. No? Well, that's good for you. Go and pick these games up. GP Legend is pretty much the ultimate version of the classic game, filled to the brim with story modes, time attacks, plenty of ships, all that good stuff, whilst the later released Climax, which is perfectly fine for any fan of the series, is really just more of the same, although it does lack a little bit in the extra content. Now guys, please, I'm not saying that these games are bad. Again, they're both absolutely fine. After all, I like the classics, and it's a formula that they nailed from the get-go 14 years before these ones came out. But come on, how many more times can they repackage these games? And that is really the reason I decided to do this complete history, with this brilliant 3D racer which perfectly improves on the already great N64 original, and probably more Mode 7 style games that you're ever going to want to play. Where else is there for this series to go? When Shigsy was told that plenty of fans want to see a new entry in the series, he replied with the same thing. What else is there to do with F-Zero? It's a tough one, because even as I lay this big steaming dump of truth onto a franchise that has literally never had a bad game in it, quite the accomplishment I might add, there is nothing else that needs to be done with this franchise, besides making an HD remake of that GameCube game in my eyes. But hey, I may be wrong. Like I said, the series was perfect from day one, and Nintendo and Sega have evolved it further than my wildest dreams. It's a series that almost outstayed its welcome, But thankfully, it did what all good shows, movies, comics, books, and in this case game franchises have done before it. It left us wanting more, and the more Nintendo tease us with Mario Kart DLC, Smash Brother characters, Nintendo Land minigames, mangas, and whatever else, they keep building up the fanboy fire. So, until we reach a time where console developers create something radically different from 2D games, 3D games, and arcade games, all of which this franchise has perfected, I say, let's leave F-Zero be. We have got plenty to keep us going. Well, other than a nice HD port, that is. With online play. Okay, I'm done. Hey there guys, thanks for checking out the 50th complete history video. Wow, can you believe it? Oh yes, and what an awesome franchise to have as my 50th complete history. So, as usual, this is the part of the video where I give a big special shout out to all of my Patreons, but an extra big special shout out goes to Ryan Burford, Gary Pinkett, Andrew Dalton, Brent Craft, Joe Lazaresi, N.A. Chapman, Phil Lowlins, Aaron McNamara, Ian Roberts, Video Game Mario Kart. But as much as he oversaw what went on and technically gave the go-ahead that would bring life to Nintendo's most popular spin-off, it was actually Tadashi Sagayama and Hideki Kono who were the true legends to the Mario Kart series. Sagayama-san joined Nintendo a good 7 or 8 years earlier and was the brainchild to the NES game Ice Climbers, and Kono's son came in a year or so later with his very first game, Ice Hockey. Both games were successes for the time, and as you may have guessed, it helped put the duo on the Nintendo world map as they continue to help develop plenty of games for years to come, including such greats as Super Mario Bros. 3, Zelda 2, Pilot Wings, Super Mario World, and SimCity, to name a few. Now, the Nintendo fans among you will notice we have already moved into the early 90s as some of these games were released for Nintendo's best, the Super Nintendo. And it's at this point that I'm going to pause the video and suggest that you make your way over to my previous complete history called F-Zero the Complete History. Because it was Miyamoto-san that tasked these two with making a follow-up to that game, with the sole mission being to turn it into a multiplayer video game. You see, as good as F-Zero was, and still is a racing game that's only for one player. Looking back now, that's pretty crazy, but for the time, nobody besides the critics cared because it looked so stunning and futuristic that it didn't matter how limited it was in that regard, people still wanted to play it. And with it being such a big success and Miyamoto famously only really wanting to make sequels that he could actually improve upon the game before them, he tasked Kono-san and Sagayama-san with doing just that, a multiplayer F-Zero.
F-Zero displays the layer for a course over an area of 100 screens in order to create a feeling of speed and scale. However, because of hardware limitations, splitting the screen for multiplayer required the courses to be displayed within an area no more than 4 TV screens wide by 4 screens high, i.e. 16 screens. We tried creating an F-Zero style circuit within that limitation, but found it too difficult to race in with an F1 type vehicle, making it impossible to create a course that could give you a feeling of speed.
Yeah, I just found this slope guy the other day. I have no idea who he is.
But it would have involved removing
This shit's pretty interesting though.
original F-Zero game that would have resulted in a game that just didn't feel as fluid, fast, or futuristic. And well,
But yeah, just to
the next step was to take.
just gonna turn him down a bit, just to explain what I've been doing here. I was making some. Let me just turn them off. It's kind of distracting. I was making some like pixel art stuff that I learned to do recently, and I tried to do a mushroom, messed it up pretty bad, and then kind of gave up on it. So I'm just gonna try out a new technique that I learned before all this pixel art stuff. So try to explain it as I go, but it's I don't know. Let me just do one thing here. I'll just try and explain it this way. So the other day I learned how to texture paint, and what I ended up doing was I ended up creating all this detail on these mushrooms just by painting them. And if you notice here, it looks like it has little dents and cuts in it, or like in some cases like these spots that raise out of it. So again, like this is just the base model that I use, and this is like all texture paint. Like, it's kind of bad. But yeah, so I was just gonna try and recreate that with that little sword. I'm trying to remember all the steps I did, but honestly, it's a little different when you just follow a tutorial and then you try to do it on your own. It's quite hard, but yeah, I'm just gonna try and tamper around with this and see what I can come up with. So take the sword, and I attempted to unwrap it so that I could paint over it. So I'll just do it right now. I mean, some of them are kind of weird though. Like, I don't know why these are slanted like that. Anyway, I'll just leave it. I don't want to tamper with it too much. So I have these faces selected. I'll go into texture paint mode, and I'll just start painting it I don't know, a very faint blue color. And I will modify my brush just a little. I'll make a new brush actually. So let's call this one dots. And I'll come into this brush, and right now it's fairly straight, right? It's just like a solid line that I'm drawing with. So if I go here, dots, increase the jitter a little bit, you can now see it's kind of like almost kind of randomized. So and I don't think dots was the one, it was something else. No, it's weird. I mean, I could swear it was dots. Maybe it was space. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry, it was just in space. So right now it's the default. I can just draw a straight line. There's a little bit of jitter to it. So if I don't know, increase the spacing of it. Yeah, there we go. So let me just reduce that a little bit and change the opacity of it. So I'll give it like a nice blue speckled look or something like that. And then I'll just, yeah, it's kind of, it's kind of weird. Maybe I'll reduce the jitter a little bit. Yeah, so I'll give it like a sort of pixelated look, but not exactly. It's more of just like a washed out kind of look. So just go over it a few times, maybe change colors. So yeah, I have this nice blue looking, I don't know, I don't like this color. I'll change it to something else. But yeah, this is, I guess, my very basic hacked together pixel art kind of style. I wouldn't really call it pixel art, to be honest, but I don't know. What the hell am I doing with this sword? I don't even know what color to paint it at this point. I'll just do like a nice deep red color for whatever reason. I'll just fill it right now. I'm feeling lazy. I'll just fill it as a solid color, as red. There. And then I'll do black speckles on it for something. I don't even know at this point. But I don't like how it's, like, I want it to be a little bit less mirrored like that, so I'll just take off these. I think I should leave Y on so it'll do the back. Yeah. Yeah, I can't think right now. I can't think of like a good color to put with this. Yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll try gray, like a nice dull gray color. But yeah, anyway, I'm just gonna turn slopes back on while I just chip away at this. But yeah, I'm not exactly trying to do like this kind of pixel art. I'm just trying to give it like a base color so I can start adding little like effects to it and stuff. So let me just see how it. Yeah, I'm just gonna.
90, and after reading an introductory book on kart racing, watching a video called Drift Contest, and finally going to the Nemo no Satu amusement park for a day of kart racing for research purposes, they finally found a style of racing that not only works well at slower speeds, but more importantly, didn't seem ridiculous when played on a track that was all bunched up together, which meant that Miyamoto-san finally got his multiplayer racing game using that all-important Mode 7. On top of this, in the very early 90s during development, it seemed that kart racing was becoming quite the fun pastime. People from all over were reading news articles about famous drivers like Senna and Agura Suzuki, which obviously just helped push the idea even further.
A fun, light-hearted game where you can zip around unrealistically in cars. It wouldn't be the life or death dangerous world of F1 racing, but more the atmosphere of screeching wheels as you zip around an amusement park. When people play this game, they're going to have a big smile on their face. That was a big goal for us, a game where both players and onlookers would be laughing and smiling.
Everything was coming together quite nicely. It was very much at this point trial and error, and the team would all sit incredibly close to one another and would often just walk over to each other's desks to make sure they all had the same vision in mind. The idea was to make it fun, and because of this, even though multiplayer was very much the original plan, they made a group decision not to play it in multiplayer during development hardly at all. The reason being was that when gamers start to compete against each other, more hardcore tactics come into play, and that original fun idea of whizzing, zipping and drifting around a race course would start to drive off into the sunset and be replaced with a more hardcore tone. Make it a fun single player experience, and if that works, then so will the multiplayer.
So now you're playing with power, superpower.
As you know, with the game's eventual release, it obviously became quite a hit. A massive hit, actually, as it ended up being the Super Nintendo's third best-selling game, raking in 8 million units, only being surpassed by Super Mario World and Donkey Kong Country, who obviously actually ended up in the game. But not at first. You see, this was simply just a fun karting game in its early days and nothing else. That's fine and all, but it lacked individuality in the visual department, as each racer in different coloured karts wearing the same shaped helmet all looked exactly the same. So the search was on to find some characters that were recognisable from behind.
We thought about what kind of character would be instantly recognizable when seen from behind, and decided to try Mario. Mario certainly is a recognizable character, even from behind, and it was instantly clear that it's him. For other racers, we chose more characters from the Mario franchise who could also be clearly recognized from behind. This was the first step in the creation of Super Mario Kart. Without this hardware limitation, we might have ended up with a different racing game.
And boy did they. Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, Toad, Yoshi, Donkey Kong Jr., Koopa Trooper and Bowser. They all found their way into the series thanks to their recognisable back of their heads, and with that, not only did Nintendo have a bloody good playable game on their hands, but now they had Nintendo's most popular names attached to it to help give it even more fun-filled and, let's be honest, most importantly, star-studded appeal. For the time, this was quite odd. Mario going up against the girlfriend stealing Donkey Kong and Bowser in a friendly match of go-karting was fairly odd, but the way Miyamoto sees it, it wasn't an issue.
Mario appearing in lots of different kinds of games is also in line with comic tradition. With this in mind, I had absolutely no objections with enemy characters racing against rivals or characters you can control yourself.
And with that, not only did it get recognisable characters and fun gameplay that everybody and their mum can get to grips with, the addition of weapons, or power-ups I should say, naturally came after. The first item added was oil. That eventually became the banana, of course, and from there plenty more offensive and defensive weapons were included to mix up the gameplay and obviously make this feel more like a true Mario game, which they obviously did with shells, ghosts and invincibility stars. It may have started off as a failed sequel, but it quickly became the birth of a series of games that quite literally never stopped being the most important games in Nintendo's rich catalogue. By today's standards, however, you may have trouble with this one. Don't hate me, it is true, my wife, who is a big Mario Kart fan from Double Dash onwards, found the original on the Super Nintendo Mini a little eye-piercing and of course limited. And although my angry retro gamer self came jumping up and shouting to defend such a legendary title, I can't deny it. I kinda see where she's coming from. Again, I am a retro gamer at heart and I can easily look past the limited view, technically invisible walls and the flat surfaces that makes it look like you're just driving around a car park. And I mean seriously, I only really like playing Mode 7 racing games on a CRT. But again, for newcomers, this may be a step back too far for most. And although as stated, this sold like mushroom-filled hotcakes, 8.76 million units to be exact, and for its time, it was probably the very best multiplayer game ever released. If you are a hardcore retro Nintendo fan, according to several polls I have seen online, it's very much likely that yes, Super Mario Kart will indeed hold a special place in your heart, but the best was yet to come.
It's me, Mario!
Super Mario Kart was released back in 1992 in most places, and it was 1993 for us Brits. And only a few years later, in 1996, Nintendo released the Nintendo 64 with the well-established Mario in his own outing as a launch title, which was obviously a rather impressive system seller, shipping a shade under 12 million units. But it wasn't the only Mario game destined to be a system seller being developed. Super Mario Kart R, the R stood for rendered by the way, was also being worked on. With this being a new system and Nintendo being well Nintendo, the game had to step it up and utilise whatever new features were on offer. This time round that ended up being 4 players. Miyamoto remembers his programmers claiming that a 4-player split-screen mode would be impossible, but unlike F-Zero's failed multiplayer, they thankfully got it to work. Again, certain bits needed to be gimped in order to get 4 separate screens all pulling off individual 3D calculations, and easily the most notable was the characters themselves. As this was a 3D rendered system, quite a bit of memory was saved when the team decided to make the characters as pre-rendered sprites. And on top of this, a technique known as billboarding was used to show other players that appear in your screen, again as 3D images, when in fact, well, they were essentially a billboard. As stated before, Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64 were being developed at the same time, with the intended plan to release both at the same time. This obviously didn't happen, as that release of the N64 drew closer. Miyamoto and the powers that be at Nintendo decided to inject more money and resources into finishing Super Mario 64 on time rather than Mario Kart 64 on time. And yes, that most definitely does make sense.
マリオカート64いよいよ登場
best-selling features, easy 4-player ability, and you got a game that will fully stand the test of time. There's nothing quite like getting 3 of your best mates round, filling up on cheap supermarket Coke and crisps while you play past the Mad Catz controller, racing, and of course, battling in Mario Kart 64. Yep, the battle mode in this game was so good that it ended up being the version that everybody relates back to when they, don't exactly get it right. I mean, yes, the original had a battle mode too, and of course multiplayer SNES gamers sure did love a bit of that, but with the N64, playing the game on a 3D landscape really did open up the possibilities that this mode could provide.
Now that we're using 3D models, we can have shadows, and things can be hidden behind other things, and you can look up or down on your opponent. It makes the strategies in battle mode very different from the first game. Of course, all of that is obvious stuff, but it's things we had really wanted to include in Super Mario Kart.
The game was eventually released in 1996 for Japan and early in 1997 for the rest of the world, and surprisingly the reviews were incredibly polarized. Some critics saw the big leap forward as one of the greatest games ever made, whilst others saw it as nothing but a slight upgrade over the original, and that the rubber banding technique removed any real competition needed for a game like this. This was no doubt due to the blue shell that got included in this game, providing relatively bad players with the ability to knock back first place, something that has been a staple of this series ever since, for better or worse. Time for another 5-year break.
Now 4 can play off one cartridge. Mario Kart for Game Boy Advance. Rated E for everyone.
Game Boy Advance. Game Boy Advance ならではの4人対戦。スリリングなデッドヒート。新しいコースが次々登場。マリオカートアドバンス。
Mario Kart Super Circuit was the very next game released in the series, this time being supervised by the original duo rather than being completely looked after by them. This time it was Intelligent Systems, more well known as the Fire Emblem and Paper Mario series, that took the lead here, and as previously stated when talking about this developer, a lot of the time they was known for simply porting a Super Famicom Disk System game over to an NES cartridge, before getting given video game creating roles of their own. This version of the Mario Kart series makes a lot more sense when you look at it like this nowadays. There are advancements that make use of the new Game Boy Advance's hardware, but most of all, if you played a lot of Super Mario Kart, you are no doubt going to be quite familiar with what is on offer here. Why? Because all 20 racetracks from the original SNES are here once again. But don't let that put you off, because you need to unlock them. There are another 20 tracks in this game to start with, giving this tiny little game a grand total of 40 tracks, which is still the most for any game in the series when you don't take into account DLC or re-releases, of course. Now, that doesn't mean this game should replace your copy of Super Mario Kart, because its playstyle is slightly different. Now, granted, I most definitely have not played it as much as the original, but from what I can tell, this is tailored much more towards your classic hardcore Mario Kart fan. Most Mario Karts are a tad easy, and yes, there is still a good amount of rubber banding going on in this game, but put this game on 150cc from the get-go and you will have a hard time working your way through the difficult stages. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what makes it so hard. I mean, I suppose it's the handling of the drifting that is most apparent, but more importantly is that this new difficulty doesn't make it a bad game. In fact, when asking people on my Discord, link below, and social media pages, link below, I got the impression that hardcore fans of the classic style actually really liked the game due to its difficulty spike the later you get on in the game. Don't let its simplistic look and recycled content put you off. When you start playing, you will realize just how unique this.
I just want to chime in and saying that I'm probably gonna end the stream pretty soon. I'm just tired of this now at this point, but this is the technique I wanted to show. So if I can briefly explain how this works. So just this blade portion here, it has two textures on it. One is the actual color that I where is it here? It's here somewhere. Anyway, it's the this Pixel Sword Blade 2, yeah. So that's what this image is, that brown coloring. And this other one, the bump map that I added, is this gray color. So from my understanding, the way bump map works, like this bump mapping, is that it's adding a little bit of detail to this texture as if it's like popping out. And the way that works is it's just how do I explain it? If it's a pure white color, like I'm painting right now, it bumps out. If it's black, I guess bump isn't the right term, but let me just go back to my normal brush here, which is not normal. So yeah, I don't know how. Oh, that's blue. Okay, that's why. So I need a black color here. So if I go to black, you'll see it starts to. It's like I'm cutting into it. It doesn't show exactly, like it doesn't show really well here, but. And okay, so yeah, if it's white. Oh, I don't know, I messed up my own example. All I'm saying is I'm just adding this extra detail to it. That's how I got on those mushroom models. That's how I added the little rips in the cap and how I made those little bumping, like, see, like that's indenting, it looks like. And if I switch it out to white, then it like sticks out. It's kind of hard to see, but it's just, I don't know, it's a nice little added effect that I figured out. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why it's not showing too well on this model. Maybe I messed something up, but yeah, it's my failed attempt at doing trying to explain it. I don't know, I'm trying to get it to work here. But yeah, I mean, it kind of works. You can kind of see it working. I just don't know why it's so weird like that. It's not important. I don't know. I think I'm gonna end the stream here, to be honest. Like, it's been going on a little too long. I kind of wanted to make more of these kind of things, but I don't know. I guess that mushroom attempt really kind of just set me back, to be honest. Like, the reason I was able to do all these other assets is because they're nice cubes to work with, and they're pretty easy to work with. I had a little bit of trouble with the barrel, but I managed to get it working. But yeah, the moment I attempted that mushroom, it all just went downhill from there. So then I tried to do the, I'll just I'll just save all this. What I ended up trying to do was make this effect. So if I just go into this mushroom really quick, go to texture paint, you can see I'm adding like, I gotta turn off that. If I paint over the mushroom, it gives you that nice bumping detail. And just like I was explaining before, if I make it black now, it cuts into the mushroom. As you can kind of see. But yeah, that's, I think I'm just gonna end it here now. Been at this for I don't even know how long, but yeah, I'm just gonna end it here now. So I don't know, like I always say, if you have questions, feel free to ask me, and I don't know what I'll do for tomorrow onwards. I don't know if I'll continue making music or if I'll just do more of these streams, or I don't know, I'll figure something out. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I won't stream as long, because this is like, I don't know, this went on a little bit too long, and usually I try to explain what I'm doing, but I don't know, just today it was kind of hard to explain what I'm doing when I'm unfamiliar with it, and it just doesn't work. Like, don't get me wrong, like, you can make, not you, I mean, like, anyone can make stuff like this, right? Like, it's not impossible, it's not exactly hard to do, but there are a lot of steps involved, and I guess it's just a lot easier if you're following a tutorial, like, minute by minute. But anyway, I got nothing else to say. I'm pretty much just gonna, I'm just gonna walk away from all this. I'm tired, so thanks for watching, and like always, just feel free to ask me any questions you have, and I'll do my best to answer them. But as you can see, I might not give you the answer you're looking for. So yeah, there's a lot of bots today. I don't know what's up with that, but that's quite a bit. So I don't know, maybe I'll just take the hint and stop streaming. So yeah, I'll see you next time.